I recently played Tony Hawk's Underground for the first time in well over a decade to celebrate its 20th anniversary, and it was such a rewarding and refreshing experience. As I'm sure it was for many, the Tony Hawk's franchise was a huge part of my childhood, and it felt really good to return to the crazy, over-the-top skateboarding gameplay that this franchise pioneered. I was shocked at how well I remembered all of its iconic stages and missions, but even more surprised at how well the game has held up over the last 2 decades. I just couldn't put the controller down as I played through the game's campy and entertaining story, and even after it was over I couldn't stop myself from messing around in free skate to try and get some big high scores. When I finally had enough of the game, I was left feeling happy and fulfilled because Tony Hawk's Underground had just given me a strong reminder of why I play video games in the first place. The combination of its incredible soundtrack, timeless gameplay, evocative aesthetic, and memorable story was just as enjoyable to experience in 2023 as it was in 2003, and it's why in this video, I want to celebrate the 20th anniversary of this stellar entry to one of my favorite gaming franchises. I hope you enjoy this look back on what I consider to be the pinnacle of Tony Hawk. Tony Hawk's Underground, or Thug 1 as it's also known as, is the pinnacle of Tony Hawk in my eyes because it perfected the franchise's signature gameplay. While each game in the series that released after the original Tony Hawk's Pro Skater did their part in evolving the foundation that game laid down, Underground took it to an entirely different level with all the new mechanics it introduced to the series. We'll touch on some of them in a little bit, but the most important element it debuted by far, and the one that we'll discuss first, is the ability to freely get off and on your skateboard. This completely revolutionized the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater formula and opened up a host of possibilities that just wouldn't have been possible previously, which is why it's the most noteworthy aspect of Thug 1. Being able to extend combos with the small grace period that's granted when you get off your board is an absolute godsend for achieving big scores and nailing tough lines, and its absence in the first 4 games makes them hard to go back to. Though I can see the argument that it makes certain challenges too easy, it's nice to have a feature that lets you autocorrect your mistakes in real time. It never feels good when you have to watch yourself wipe out because you accidentally flew off a vert ramp with nothing to transfer to, or jumped off a rail without enough rotation for a clean landing, and this feature helps prevent those frustrating situations from happening. Now you can abandon a trick or a jump you know is going to end in failure, and not only do you not get punished for it, you are actually given a chance to pivot to another trick to keep the combo going. What I admire about this mechanic is how it keeps the flow of gameplay moving in a way that feels natural. If you were skateboarding in real life and tried a move that looked doomed from the start, you wouldn't just stick with it and eat shit into the concrete, you'd abandon the trick to either try something else or try again later. It's a seamless feature that fits right in, and I like that it doesn't feel cheap either, as the somewhat limited timer forces you to make quick decisions if you want to keep your line alive. Ultimately, being able to get on and off your board improves the gameplay because it allows you to be far more creative with your skating now that you have additional movement options and combo extenders that let you take full advantage of each stage's excellent level design. It also helps the world feel more immersive, as you can now fully explore each of Thug 1's expressive stages freely. Being able to walk makes it easier to appreciate all of the details crammed into each of these iconic levels, and adds to the sense of discovery within each location. Getting off your board also allows you to climb and use ladders, which adds some welcome verticality to each world that was largely missing in prior Tony Hawk titles. Along with skitching, which returns from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4, using the added verticality is one of the best ways to gain a lot of speed quickly, and hitting a massive acid drop so you can get the height you need to pull off some of the cooler special tricks in the game is always a blast. Freeing the player from their skateboard also allowed the developers to experiment with some non-skating activities as well. While there are those who feel that many of the non-skateboarding activities are underdeveloped and a waste of time, I believe their inclusion was crucial in keeping the series feeling fresh. After 4 games of nothing but skateboarding action, the franchise needed to keep evolving, and it only makes sense that giving the player more freedom within the world would provide the developers the opportunity to try out some different ideas. In this regard, Thug 1 never truly shies away from trying things out, and while not all of them work, they ultimately add to the game's charm and identity in a meaningful way. I can't imagine this game without its goofy driving sections or the randomness of its stealth missions, and while they aren't necessarily good, they add an endearing level of character to the game that would be missed if they were removed. Though gameplay is the most important factor to Thug 1's success, there's no denying how important its tone and feel are to its lasting legacy. Everything plays a part in creating its unmistakable atmosphere, from its insane story, to its gritty menus, to its killer soundtrack, and I think removing any of it would detract from the distinct vibe that this game gives off. Part of the reason Tony Hawk's Underground is so memorable is because you can't find another game with the same kind of mood and attitude as this game has. Playing Thug 1 is like being transported directly back to the early 2000s, and you can really feel it in every mission, graphic, cutscene, and line of dialogue, and the fact that the game serves as a time capsule of sorts contributes to why it holds up so well. Of course, that's coming from someone who lived during that time, so it might just be my nostalgia speaking, but I feel the same way about games like GTA Vice City as well, which embody the feel of the 80s, which I of course wasn't around for. Really, it's a credit to Thug 1's artistic direction that 2 decades later it still perfectly captures the skater aesthetic and culture of the time, and I think Neversoft deserves recognition for crafting such a carefully stylized experience. That said, a big part of what defines this game's personality comes from its story, which is a brand new concept introduced to the Tony Hawk series in Thug 1. I consider it just as important to Underground's legacy as the new gameplay mechanics it debuts, and I think it's time to look at what makes it so memorable. The single-player campaign in Tony Hawk's Underground succeeds because despite its campy, over-the-top nature, it tells a timeless story that captures the spirit and essence of what it means to be a skater. It's a surprisingly good first attempt at incorporating a narrative into the Tony Hawk franchise that has plenty of twists and turns, an easy-to-hate villain, a wholesome message, and just about everything else you could ask for from a skateboarding story. It's a classic rags to riches tale that starts you off as a teenage kid from the suburbs of New Jersey who rides around on a beat-up board with no money and no sponsor, and sees them evolve over the course of the game into one of the top pro skaters in the country. There's humor, there's drama, but importantly, Thug 1 doesn't take itself too seriously, as evidenced by all the batshit insane objectives you'll be forced to complete along the journey. And it's this self-awareness that allows the game to be so ridiculous and fun, as many of these absurd goals leave a lasting impression unlike anything we'd seen in the series prior. Right from the start, things get pretty wild, as you won't be more than 30 minutes into the game before you're involved in a car chase to steal back your friend from some drug dealers, and it only gets more extreme from there. Over the rest of Thug 1's runtime, you'll help a New Yorker commit insurance fraud, break into a heavily guarded Russian military complex, ghost ride a police vehicle into the ocean, align with the Russian mob to escape your imprisonment in Moscow, and risk your life tricking over an airborne helicopter. You'll also have less insane, but still ludicrous tasks to complete for a skateboarding game, like bypassing a police blockade by using a ramp to leap over a bridge, chasing down a bank robber to help a security guard, and jumping hundreds of feet over the street from one hotel rooftop to another in Hawaii. And if these goals didn't seem preposterous enough already, they seem even more out there when you consider how a majority of the other missions revolve around just getting a high score or nailing tricks as they're called out to you. It's this jarring back and forth between traditional skating objectives and movie-level stunts that gives Underground's story its comical, lighthearted character, and I've always enjoyed how silly it can be at times. It helps that Eric Sparrow is such a hilariously despicable villain that at times he reminds me of a pro wrestling bad guy. Just when you think he can't get any scummier, he sinks to new lows, and in the end it feels cathartic to see him get his comeuppance for screwing you over so many times. Seriously, this dude is a rat bastard that tried screwing you out of an opportunity to become pro, framed you for a crime he committed that got you detained in a foreign country, and most egregiously of all, stole the tape of the sickest skate footage you ever recorded and claimed it as his own so he could get the credit instead of you. With all that in mind, Thug 1's story is satisfying for other reasons as well, and its customization options come to mind right away. Like previous entries in the series, you will be allowed to create a custom skater in Underground, and thankfully the game allows you to use that character in the story mode. Nothing feels more video gamey than cutscenes with custom characters, and it adds so much charm to them when you're able to see your dumb creation looking out of place with a voice that doesn't match their body. It's also just funny to see people or characters skating that you'd never expect, and it's why in this video all the footage contains the Lord of Dark Slides himself, the Underskater. Thug 1 takes its character creation a step further though, as in addition to allowing you to customize their appearance, the game also marks the first time that the series lets you create custom decks and tricks for your character as well. It's honestly surprising it took 5 games for the custom deck feature to be introduced, and while it's nice to have, the more groundbreaking addition was definitely the Trick Creator. By combining existing animations in the game, you were able to set the duration, rotation, and type of special move that the trick would be to create a brand new move for your character to use. While it isn't perfect and was a bit overhyped during the game's promotional campaign, it's still a pretty neat mechanic that shows how the developers were totally committed to giving the players the ultimate control over their gameplay experience, and it's something I still appreciate to this day. Choices in video games are really never a bad thing, which brings me to one of the final praiseworthy aspects of the game's campaign, which is the ability to choose your own skate team. Though your decision has very little in-game impact, this just felt so awesome back in the day because you were given the choice of who you wanted to represent. It was sick how so many different teams were vying for you to join them, and I still enjoy watching each team's promotional video that sold you on why they were cool. In hindsight, it's kind of funny how I and so many others chose Element because of Bam Margera's popularity at the time, because when you compare Element's video now to the rest of the other teams without that context, you'd probably imagine no one would have picked the guy doing boring tricks who only talks about how awesome skating in Philly is. Later on towards the game's finale, you have the opportunity to create your own skate team and can recruit from the list of skate legends that made it into Tony Hawk's Underground. You get to name the team, customize its lineup, and then play as these famous pro skaters in a few challenging missions before the end of the game, and it's awesome. Again, who you select doesn't affect what goals you have to complete or anything, and truthfully their stats aren't all that important either, but it's pretty sweet that the game gives you the choice of selecting your favorite skaters rather than forcing you into a preset team. It's the best way I could think of closing out such a memorable story, and I love that it puts you in the perfect position to take Eric Sparrow down once and for all in the game's infamously challenging final mission. When I reflect on Thug 1's campaign, I am left with nothing but positive vibes and good memories because pretty much everything about it works. I love the moral of not losing yourself in the money and fame that comes with making it big, and to always remember that the love of skating should come first and foremost. I'm fond of the stat progression system and the ability to unlock hidden characters and classic Tony Hawk Pro Skater levels. I enjoy collecting secret tapes and each Pro Skater's special move throughout every level. And of course I love the nutty, off-the-wall nature of the story's nonsensical missions and how it doesn't take itself too seriously. There is so much to do in Tony Hawk's Underground, and I appreciate how much stuff was packed into a game that launched in 2003. The fact that even back then you could connect to the internet to upload your own creations or download others was truly mind-blowing and made Thug 1 even more robust with content than it already was. With all its creative modes, this was like the Super Mario Maker of skateboarding games, and though I personally never took advantage of this feature, I'd feel remiss if I didn't acknowledge this game-changing feature that debuted years before DLC was commonplace in gaming. I'm sure it helped foster a sense of community for the game's player base at the time, and Underground deserves credit for including a feature that was so ahead of its time. Tony Hawk's Underground is not flawless, and it has aged in certain ways, but I think you'll find that the game is just as fun to play today as it was when it released in 2003. Outside including a classic mode like its sequel Thug 2 would, I really struggle to find ways to improve the Underground experience because Thug 1 holds up so well. Of course, the graphics aren't the nicest to look at anymore, and there are a few bugs and glitches that can be annoying at times, but that's pretty much par for the course for any game released in the first decade of 3D gaming where games couldn't be patched or updated. Truthfully, these elements don't make a noticeable negative impact on the game, and if they really bother you, it's easy enough to find mods online that fix these issues thanks to the dedicated Tony Hawk's Pro Skater online community. In the end, Tony Hawk's Underground still feels like the pinnacle of the series all these years later, and I encourage everyone to play this title whether it's your first time altogether or just your first time in many years. The fun that can be had in this game's superbly designed sandboxes is virtually endless, and as I said at the beginning of the video, playing through Underground reminded me why I love video games so much. In an era of gaming where every model is polished to perfection, where every story is 100 plus hours long with a billion things to do, it was nice to go back to something a little more rugged and simple. Thug 1's small but densely packed levels blend so beautifully with the game's addictive, easy to pick up and play gameplay, and it's a recipe for success that I wish more game developers would borrow from. One or two focused, well-executed ideas are all that you need for a great game, and though Tony Hawk's Underground introduced a lot of new ideas to the series, it never loses focus of what makes it great at its core. Thug 1 will forever be an influential title in gaming's history, and while it may never receive the remaster it so obviously deserves, I think its quality and reputation will rightfully stand the test of time for many years left to come. Hey everyone, thanks for watching my video celebrating Tony Hawk's Underground. I hope you enjoyed this look back at a classic 20-year-old title, and I'm curious what you think of it. What are some of your favorite moments or memories from Thug 1? Let me know down in the comment section, and also remember, if you enjoyed this video, to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell to be alerted whenever I release a new video.